There it is. Okay, so good morning. Today is a continuation of what we started last time, where we talked about sound and equipment. So last week we talked about how to use the Zoom H2s, as well as the lavalier microphone and the shotgun microphone that we have here. So today we're going to basically start by first learning how to set it up. We're going to record our first audio clips. We will offload the audio clips into computers. We have 3 laptops here if you do not have your own. And from there we are going to take a look at the editing workflow for you to edit your podcasts. Yeah? Does anyone have any questions from last time? No? Fairly basic stuff, right? So let's start talking about how to set up the equipment. First, let me just give you guys a lavalier microphone kit. We only have 3 kits today, so you guys will have to share on that side of the table. And I will have 1. So with the lapel / lavalier microphone, this is a wireless lav kit. As we said, there is a receiver pack and a transmitter pack. The transmitter pack goes onto your talent. My very important question to you is, what must you tell your talent when you hand them the lavalier kit?
Mute switch.
The mute switch.
It's on.
Yeah, make sure that the mute switch, they know that it exists, and they don't go to the bathroom without hitting the mute switch. You do not want audio recordings of that. Okay? So, first things first, let's talk about where and how to apply the lapel mic. So the lapel mic is what type of microphone? What is its pickup pattern? Yes, it's an omnidirectional microphone, so it picks up in a circular shape around the microphone. So basically, its best pickup range is, I believe, between 30 centimeters and I believe a meter. So if you clip it to somebody, you would want to clip it a little bit far away so you're not getting too close. You want to make sure that it is out of the way of the airstream coming out of the mouth. That would remove the possibility of picking up too many plosives. You want to clip it somewhere right on their lapel, right like there. Whoop, if I can clip it properly. You want to clip it there, and you want to get them to hide this cable. Generally, it looks better if they do. For you guys, it's a podcast, so it doesn't quite matter. But if there's going to be a visual component to it, then you will want them to hide the cable. Again, you want to make sure that when they do hide the cable, that it is not going somewhere where it can be tangled, where it can be pulled upon, because the last thing you want is to halfway through your interview, the guy goes wham, and the thing, well, didn't fall off this time, but it has fallen off in the past. So you want to make sure that the cable is secure. Now, one thing you do not want is it to be clipped inside like this, because what that means is it's going to rub against your clothing or rub against your skin, and that might cause issues. If you do need to hide it, you can also hide it down here underneath the lapel, and run the cable through around the neck and down their back. There are a lot of creative ways that you can use to hide these microphone lines. Sometimes I would also suggest bringing some skin tape, and you can just tape it. For example, if they're wearing a dress without pockets, that may be necessary. Same with these mic packs. If they have nowhere to clip it, you may be able to find belt packs for these where you hide them. So for example, on news TV, you often see the anchors, they'll have these mic packs on their back. So that is how you connect to this. To turn it on, there's a power switch on the inside of the microphone. Press and hold to turn it on. Likewise, on the on the receiver side, you press and hold to turn on. Have you been in 202?
Not yet.
You're in it right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this should be familiar to you, most of it. Yeah. Did you guys do the sound lab together or separately? Did you guys do any of the labs together?
Yeah, we did all of the ones that require equipment together.
Okay, so the sound was a group lab, twit lab as well. Cool. Oh, Okay. So inside your kit, you will also find 2 cables. A male-to-male 3.5 millimeter cable. I don't understand I think this is female. Female XLR to 3.5 millimeter cable. So these two have 2 different purposes. If you're using the Zoom H4n, you would be wanting to use this cable, as you can take the 3.5 millimeter output of the receiver and plug it into an XLR port. If you are using a Zoom H2, as we are in this case, you will want to use the dual end 3.5 millimeter cable. And that would plug in, is there a Zoom H2 here? Yep, that would plug in on the, this would be the right-hand side, and you would most likely plug it into the external microphone input. So go ahead and hook that up right now. Take care as you plug in the 3.5 millimeter. On the receiver side, you want to screw it in so that it does not get pulled out accidentally. This is where a pair of monitoring headphones would be very, very nice, as you would be able to listen to your audio. So if you have headphones, now would be the time to bring them out. Card. There's a card. Test. Ooh. Okay. Maybe clipping on that audio, but oh well.
So are you going them to do like gather audio clips and
Yep.
then edit those?
Yep, in a bit.
I wonder if, because I was gonna do at the end of mine, have them practice interviewing each other.
Mm-hmm.
Should that be the audio clips that they gather and then practice editing those?
Sure. So why don't we do setup, and I'll do the other setup,
Yeah.
and then you
Then
take
I'll do
over,
more of it,
and then
we can go back to and then
Yeah.
do the audio editing.
that sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Checking. There any sound? Checking.
Still?
Yes. Let's see. Checking.
Yep.
Is it too loud?
Not too bad.
Okay. Checking.
Yeah.
Woo. Okay. I just did that. Yeah.
Do you want to hear it?
Interesting.
Cool. Testing. Good.
Nice and clear.
Sweet.
Hello. Oh wow. Okay, so it does work. Hello. Oh, it totally does work. Turn the volume up. Hello. Oh, does that work? Is it coming through the speakers or no? I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is my monitoring signal you're hearing here. Yeah, so that is how you set it up. If you plug it in, you should be able to hear a nice clean signal. The last thing you want, and this is might happen to your piece of equipment, is you don't want to hear this. And that is most oftentimes because these cables are damaged. This has happened to our wireless lab kits, where sometimes the cable is not has been damaged at some point, and that requires you to bring it back to the library to get a new one, because you do not want this as a part of your audio. Yeah. Hello, Susan.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Hi.
Good.
So that is the Sennheiser wireless lab kit. Are there any questions? I'm just gonna click it on. I don't have to speak so loud, I can whisper. You can still hear me though. Oh, well. Anyways, so next we're gonna talk about the shotgun microphone. Again, this is not as useful for you guys, as you guys are not, filming. However, this may be useful for if you're going to be capturing any of the sessions, if you're going to be attending a session, and you do not have the ability or the number of microphones to mic all the speakers up, you may just want to use a shotgun microphone, as you can just point it at the speaker and hopefully capture a good audio.
Probably good enough for this. Like, people don't expect, to have some
Yeah.
ambient sound. As long as you can hear it, it's
Yeah.
probably good.
Yeah, so this is generally good enough. What's the pickup pattern for the shotgun microphone? Narrow and long, right? So when you are doing that, you want to make sure that your audio source, there is nothing behind your audio source making a lot of noise. So for example, if I pointed at Tessa and there's someone in the hall screaming over there, right behind her, it is going to pick that up. It might not pick me up as much, but it sure as hell will pick up the thing that is behind her screaming. So you want to make sure whenever you're pointing the microphone, you're pointing it strategically. So it might not be quite as simple as just doing that. It might mean, for example, if there is like an air vent, like that one over there. So if I point it at myself like this, you're picking up that air vent. It may mean pointing it down. So that is the beauty of the boom pole that you will get with this mini boom kit. You can actually mount it onto a boom pole. You will probably not need to be actually booming them, but it may be beneficial to have it so you can just get it a little bit higher or adjust so you're not just holding it like that. I mean, yes.
So I know you guys have gone over it. With a podcast, which I've not done before, do you think, so you've done like documented video, do you think about B-roll? Like, you know what I mean? Like that you have like would you go and try and pick up some of these sessions that you have your interview? Like if I do a documentary, I shoot my interview, and then I try and have a bunch of stuff to cut to make it more interesting. And so like you think of like getting little bits of sessions or people, and then as they're talking, you have like little bits of stuff that you can cut away to fill in. Would that be in a podcast? Would we be thinking like that?
Well, we'll have audio of all, like the keynote speaker and the opening session of the UGC will be recorded, so they can use that.
Oh, right. So that's
And then I guess if there are any of the sessions that you want to record the whole thing just to have, then we can think about setting that up.
you might be able to, people are willing, that room is like set up to be mic'd, right? Like you can actually just get them, ask them if they'll wear a lapel mic, and then you get a really good, because it's all, that room is it's fully wired, that room, right? And so you set up to record lectures.
Not all the rooms actually at the SCA.
Are they not? I would
No.
think that one is like,
The cinema, yeah.
The cinema is, yes.
The
We'll be
cinema, yeah.
capturing the feed off of the cinema anyways for the video.
right, so you have tons of B-roll then, you could
Yeah.
Yeah.
drop in, that we could get a hold of,
Oh.
and make it a little more lively.
Yeah, and we'll talk about effects later because CED has this giant audio library that you'll have access to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because those are probably more relevant because what is B-roll for audio?
I know, that's what I was thinking, like if
Yeah.
it was video, you try and capture all because you can cut away and show
It's most of
people.
the important stuff. Like when I listen to some podcasts, they have like just some cuts of the important stuff that will be heard during the podcast at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Like a
just
little teaser
keeps
trailer
the
for
listener
that?
intrigued. Like they just want to listen to it. No, as they go in.
Just getting into podcasts, so I'm not.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Having the sound effects library.
Yeah.
Like, sounds like people walk in.
And we'll talk about the sound effect library in a bit.
All right. Sorry to take out. Just
Yeah.
give us the process.
Okay, so the next is just this boom pole. So this is a boom pole. You use it to hold a microphone, not to hit anybody with it. I know it's a long thing. Do not hit anybody with this thing. You also want to be wary when you are using the boom pole that when you extend it to its maximum length. These are the mini booms, so they don't go very long, but we have very long booms that you have access to that I believe are something like 10 feet.
You don't. Like
You
how
don't need
strong
it.
are you going to be? Like imagine like, okay.
Yeah.
Like holding this because you got to hold them up high.
But if you have a very long boom pole, please be aware of where there are hanging objects like this microphone or sprinklers. Do not take a sprinkler down. That will cost you and your production a very pretty penny. Has happened before. So, this is a boom pole. To extend it, twist, extend or shrink, lock. To mount the microphone, what you do is you just screw it in. It's like watching paint dry. It's great. Very interactive. Okay, and we have an XLR cable right here that will also come with the mini boom kit. To attach the XLR cable, you plug it into the back. You want to make sure you're plugging the correct end in. As you can see, We have 2 different ends. If you plug the wrong end in, it will not plug in. Should be fairly.
Can you damage it by trying to put the wrong end in?
You can actually if you push it. So if you try and put the wrong end in, not really with XLR, but with other cables you can. So with XLR, you want to match the 3 ports to the 3 pins, and it should be a direct slip plug-in. Do not try to force it in, and more importantly, when you are taking it off, there is a button that you need to depress to pull it out. If you do not depress that button, do not try and pull it out. I have seen this before in production, where Mr. Strong Guy decided, all right, I'm going to take it out and I'm going to use my brute force without pulling, and it just took the entire guts of the microphone out. It wasn't the NTG2, it was I think a Shure microphone. It wasn't an expensive microphone, but Boss Man was not happy with us at the end of the day. Make sure when you're removing this, you are pressing down on the button and it should come out fairly easily. So with this, you will want to just wrap this cable. When you're using the boom, you do not want a loose cable dangling around. That is A, inconvenient, B, a ginormous tripping hazard. The best practice is to just wrap your cable around the boom pole so it's not dangling. You're not going to be in front of a camera, so it doesn't really matter if if it dangles a little bit, but this is just best practice when using a boom pole. For you guys, you will most likely just be, holding it like that, because you don't need, there's no camera. There's no need to have it suspended above anybody. So you can just hold it like that, and it's kind of like a podium microphone.
That would be nice, because things get really heavy really quickly.
Yeah. So that's basically it. On this end, now this end is a bit of a challenge, I think. Hello.
Welcome, come on in.
So on this end, in the mini boom kit, there is the cable that is what I presume to be a female XLR. I don't know the XLR nomenclature because they both have pokey ends and not pokey ends.
I don't know, I never would.
So with this is basically a coupler. What you do, put it in, and it goes to a male 3.5 millimeter that you can plug into your microphone or into your audio recorder, like so. And let's see if we can pick the feed from it. External mic in. Let's go to maximum gain. Test. Yeah? It's coming through?
Yeah.
So there you go. So that is how you set up the shotgun microphone. Any questions? You're like, what did I miss?
I already know how to do it.
Perfect. Okay, if there are no questions, what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to Tessa, who will go over interviewing tips, yes? Yes,
I need
interviewing
to
tips.
print something,
Okay.
and my computer has decided to freeze again.
Oh no. Yeah, we should talk to IT about that because Brittany was having the same problem. Not Brittany, Andrea was having the same problem. Do you want projector?
I cannot. No, I just need to print something.
Okay.
Okay.
You want me to go grab it?
I can't do anything.
Oh.
If you have a USB, I could just walk with it to Document Solutions for you. They're probably open.
Yeah, I can. Let's see. Will it let me print? Oh,
It's
it
probably
will.
the password thing. I've been not able to print or use almost anything since passwords.
Which passwords?
Because I have to change it
Oh,
affects every system,
yeah.
and there's preferences. It's difficult to find exactly where it sometimes is.
Yeah, for sure.
It will let me print it.
But the wireless printing system is
Yeah, bad things have happened to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to show these.
Alright, I'm gonna go.
Okay.
If you want, do you want help with seeing this? Does anyone, if you have a USB Document Solutions, might be the easiest.
I think it's gonna let me hit print.
So, that's a luck.
Oh. So yeah, once you guys get some sort of communication channel set up, I'd be happy to. What are you guys using right now? Just email?
Yeah.
Yeah. Figure out a communication channel. I'd be happy to help. Susan,
Yeah, I would like to
what
be
else?
part of it. If you, I don't know, I'm not a fan of Facebook. but you've done, the Facebook groups have worked well, and so if people are willing to participate on Facebook, I don't know if people have Facebook accounts.
Yeah.
I have one. I look at it about once a year when the 202 stuff goes onto it. And that's about it. But it does. But having something like that, whatever you guys like, would be good rather than just flying emails around.
Yeah.
All
Or
right,
like if it's like a
one.
WhatsApp group or whatever, you know, whatever works. I think, yeah.
How many of you would want to meet on this campus? Is that, I know you do you guys come out here very often or just for this?
I live up in Burnaby, but my classes are here.
Here, so you're
My classes are in downtown, but I live in Makeridge, so I either go through here or quick at one to.
all right, so maybe, so I'm gonna look to maybe see if I can find a space or something you guys could meet. And then you'd have somewhere to sit and work together. Alright. So if we have, either maybe make one of the small editing suites of the podcast room.
Okay.
These are not gonna be used right now, there's one of them that's slightly bigger. Would you
Yeah,
guys use
what-
it if I
what-
set up for
this-
an
they're
editing
talking about this
spot
one?
for you guys? Or you,
That should be more.
you know the little mini media suites, you know where the green room is?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's those rooms there. I could make one of those as a podcast meeting room,
I'll
something
be right
like
back.
that. Sometimes it's nice to have like a
Special.
well, it can help community a little bit, like if there's somewhere that you can physically meet that isn't sitting outside the lens, like with your
Or like in
laptop.
one of the studios that.
And there's monitor speakers in there and stuff like that, so you can listen to it. It's better for audio mixing to have monitor speakers.
Sure.
Okay, I will ask the powers that be and see if it's a doable thing, but I think I could reserve that for you guys and then put your names on it or something.
Have you spoken to Mark at all?
Now and then, mostly just via email. I was actually thinking of asking him to come in and do a guest lecture for 202.
Ooh, that'd be a good one.
I know.
Yeah, that would be great.
He's here teaching a course this semester.
Yeah, he's doing body interface, isn't he?
Yeah, we always drag him on back. Come back.
Mark, come back.
Come back. I wondered if he'd be a good person to ask.
Yeah, for which?
For anything really.
Oh, yes, for
anything with
sure.
sound.
For sure.
But yes, he's around here. Okay, come maybe if you have time, stop by when you're done.
Your office? Yeah. Sounds good. Ooh, ComCom first, and are you gonna be around at 2:30? I have ComCom at 12:30.
I'll probably be gone. I have a meeting in Burnaby.
Okay, I'll try and drop by once we're done here.
If not, then I don't know, whenever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks, Susan.
Bye.
Okay, so while she's gone, why don't we? Do you guys have your own computers with Audition?
Audacity.
Log in. Because you know, as much as I want to support all the different options of software, I don't. Like, people are like in 202, they're like, oh, can I edit my film on Final Cut? I'm like, I'm not teaching you Final Cut, but you're welcome to.
What do you teach them?
The audio room, that production with the giant mixing board, would that be an okay room to meet in? Or is it too big?
It's a bit much.
It's a little too big.
It's a bit, yeah, it's a bit much.
It's a bit much.
I would say the recording studio beside it would be not a bad place.
Oh, even though people do, well, they don't have to have it all the time, right?
No.
Because people do use that because it has the location,
They can have like, if they set up like a weekly time, like they can schedule like 4-hour, 6-hour block.
I'm not sure, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Or, yeah, because and they're also going to be at the end of the term anyways. When they're really working, so it won't collide with project as much.
No, most people will be in post-production by then. So
Yes.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yes.
I mean, if they're not in post, we have other things to worry about.
Okay.
Here's your power.
Okay, what was the program that we're?
Sorry?
What was the program that we're?
Audition. It would be really, really, really awkward if these computers didn't have it after I promised that they would. Do you guys want to learn how to use the mixer? We have a mixer as well, like a mix board with 2 microphones.
That would be nice.
Okay, why don't I'll go grab it after Tess comes back because she has my key. And here she comes.
Audition, but I'm
Thank you.
updating my Creative Cloud.
It's not what we do.
Yeah, I'm just updating my Creative Cloud.
email this out as well, and there are some things that are hyperlinked. So you will have a nice copy. Okay.
And then I'll bring the mixer in.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so we're just gonna go through this handout. There's just a bunch of, first it starts with different types of podcasts. It's kind of related to what Rachel was talking about last time with the different formats that you might want to consider. And then we'll talk about kind of how interviews go with each of those formats, and then what the purpose of an interview is in your podcast. And then the process of interviewing, how to write good interview questions, and then I'll get you guys to try a couple of exercises to practice. So, first, have you guys done any thinking about kind of what format you would want to do for this podcast? Like, are you thinking documentary style, or just interviewing one person for half an hour? Like, have you thought just individually? Yeah.
I have a question actually, because I wasn't clear. Are we supposed to sort of focus on the material that's being presented in the conference, or focus on the conference as a subject in
Right.
itself?
So I think either one would be fine. So that's where you can decide what angle you want to take. So you could have a podcast where you're documenting the day of the conference, and it's sort of like, here's what happened, and you've got interviews with people who were there, and you've got clips of the keynote speech and all that stuff with a bit of narration in between. Or you could say, I want to do an episode that is talking about the 10-year history of the conference and how it started and what each year was about, and interviewing the faculty ambassadors. And then you may have a bit of stuff from the day of, but not really, because it's more of a historical. So it's kind of up to you what aspect of the conference you want to focus on.
Yeah, but it's not about like actually transmitting what's being presented at the conference to a broader audience.
No. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that would be, I guess, that would be a little more boring, I suppose, if it was just a recording of literally, here's the keynote speech and then that's it. So it's a little more, I guess you're adding your own kind of commentary and putting it together.
Do we have a description of who's doing like what speeches and stuff? Or, like,
Well, we
what
have,
the
okay, so at the end of this handout, there's one of your exercises is going to be to try and create some interview questions for the keynote speaker, Jeff Ward. So I'll give you a few minutes to kind of research him online and then write up some questions. We'll just do that together as an exercise. Yes,
Pause
Dave.
for 1 second while I restart the recording. All right.
Okay.
Back to you.
Carrying on. So there's really the keynote speaker is the biggest kind of person that you need to know about at the conference, and then everyone else is student presenters. And I have a list of student presenters who have already said they're okay with being interviewed for the podcast. So I'll send that out, or I'll get Kim to send that out as well. Yeah. Okay, so let's just quickly talk about kind of the 3 different categories that your podcast might fall into. So you could do a documentary style where you're maybe you're following along one UGC presenter's experience, like interviewing them about how they prepared for the conference, what is their presentation about, and then you have clips of their presentation day of, and then their thoughts, and then so it's all about that one person, kind of going really in-depth with that. Or like we said before, it's a history of the whole UGC, and it's also a documentary with interviews. Or you could have just an interview with one person, maybe just the keynote speaker, or one faculty ambassador you're really interested in finding out their involvement. You could do a panel interview where you're interviewing all 3 faculty ambassadors to get their perspective, or one student from each school. So it's really up to you. There's a few examples here of podcasts that take those formats. So for documentary, Finding Cleo is a CBC podcast. I don't know if anyone's heard of it or listened to it. Have you heard of it?
I remember it was mentioned in the recording from
Oh
last
yeah, that's
time.
right. So yeah, that's where a CBC reporter is kind of, so I guess the difference too between documentary and narrative that we'll talk about in a sec is that with the documentary style, the story is like unfolding during the podcast, so it's more of an investigation kind of thing, and it's right. Whereas with a narrative, it's sort of just one person telling the story throughout the podcast, and it's not like actively being investigated during the podcast. And so for narrative, the example here is Secret Life of Canada, which is another CBC podcast, and that one, sort of the investigation and research is all done before the podcast, and they're just telling you the story. Here's what we found, instead of you feeling like you're along the journey with them doing that research. So if that makes any sense. And then, yeah, okay, any questions about those three types, or any further thoughts about what you want to do?
Yeah, I think I'm most interested in the interview sort of format.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to presenters, because I think that in the 15 minutes that they have to present, they won't be able to cover like their personal relationship to the topic,
Right.
what brought them
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
sort of present there, and what created their slightly cross-disciplinary interest in like participating. So I think that might be interesting, especially like recently I've been listening to podcasts that are with film directors who have presented at film festivals, and it really opens up a lot more than just the film delivers and hearing that backstory.
Yeah, that's very true. You get to learn a lot more about their process and what they've gone through to produce it. Yeah, that's true. The example here, long form, is probably kind of similar. It's where they interview one magazine writer for about an hour, so each episode is very long, and it's just one person talking about how they do their work. So that kind of thing can be very interesting. It's very in-depth. Yeah. Okay, so then moving on. So the purpose of the interview in your podcast obviously will be different depending on the format. Your interview might be there to, have just to add important details. It might be supporting, if it's a documentary style, maybe it's research, or it's of something you found out, or it's kind of supporting like factual stuff that's supporting what you're saying in the podcast, or maybe it's there for more entertainment value if you have a clip of the keynote who said something funny or whatever. So that's for you to also think about. If you're including an interview, what's the purpose of it and why is it there and how is it adding to your episode? Other considerations with interviews is one-on-one is usually easier. Panel interviews can be more challenging just in terms of steering the conversation, right? When you're talking to multiple people, that can be more difficult. But for the most part, I think since your interviews aren't really going to be live, you're kind of going to be recording them and then editing them and including them later. So less of a concern, but you still want to consider that you may want to have a good chunk of an interview that you want to just include. So you do want to have these nice back and forth conversations with people. And then tools, I think there's a typo here. I think your recorder is not an H4N. I think it's an H2, but anyways.
But we get access to both, right?
I think so. As a CET student, I think you do have
and I'm an
access to.
IO2 specifically, so
yeah. That's true. So whatever voice recorder you can find, it's fine. And then for interviewing, so I always like to have a spiral bound notebook. Well, first of all, bring a notebook, bring a pen. Even though you're recording the interview, you will want to take notes throughout it. Bring extra SD cards, batteries, all that kind of stuff, just in case something goes wrong. Bring water always. And a good tool that I recently found is called otter.ai, and it transcribes your interviews for you for free. So that is also very good. And there will be a link to that in this handout when Kim emails it out. Okay, any questions so far? And then we'll move on to kind of the interview process.
In the email with all of the different presenters, because I was sort of thinking about doing something like with presenters with similar themes.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
For the different student presenters, will there be like a description of what their thing is?
I think there's a title of it. I don't know if there's, but I think the program itself is going to be ready very soon, and in there it might have a little one sentence of, so we'll see what we can find in terms of description, and that would be useful for you guys to have.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Now we'll move on to the interview process. So I guess I should have mentioned at the beginning kind of like, what do I know about interviewing and why am I telling you guys this stuff? So aside from my work here at SFU, I also am an arts journalist, and I write about mostly theater and dance, and so I interview a lot of people. And I have wrote for The Peak and was the arts editor at The Peak, and then wrote for a few other websites, and now I write for dance magazines primarily. So anyways, that's my experience with interviewing. So let's talk about before the interview. What do you need to do? Obviously, you need to book a time with your person. Generally, I'd suggest at least an hour. And don't book anything for yourself right after the interview. You don't want to be rushing away. Like, you don't want to be like, okay, I gotta go. If they want to talk longer, then you should stay. And often people, I find they'll tell you like, oh, I gotta leave at like 5, but then it's 5:30 and they're sitting there and talking to you, and it's fine. So give yourself lots of extra time. Select a really good quiet location, especially for you with your format. Usually for me, I'm doing interviews for a written article, so the quality of the audio, I don't care, I just need to know what they're saying, but for you guys, you need to be more careful with that. Obviously, you want to choose a location where they'll be comfortable and they'll want to talk to you and open up. So for my purposes, a coffee shop is fine because I don't care about background noise and blenders and whatever, but for you guys, probably not, because that will be too much background noise. So somewhere very quiet. Obviously, do your research. Read up on the person that you'll be talking to. Do a Google search, stalk them online, read other interviews that they've done, if they've been on a podcast. I don't know if anyone that you're interviewing will have been on a podcast, but if they have, listen to it. I think our keynote speaker, Jeff Ward, I think like he's done TED Talks, he's got a ton of stuff online, so you'll want to research him if you're going to interview him. And then prepare some thoughtful questions. And we'll review in a second what those questions should look like. Also, don't send a list of questions to your person in advance. It ruins the interview because they prepare answers. And then you get to your question, they're like, oh, yeah, and then they're just reciting what they wrote yesterday or something. So you want it to be a natural conversation. You don't want it to be like prepared. I mean, you will have prepared questions, but you also aren't going to stick to those questions. So it should just feel natural. Okay, so that's kind of before the interview. That all sounds good? Then, okay, during the interview. So I always want to start with asking them, like, you don't want to just launch into your first prepared question. Obviously, you want to, like, be a human about it and ask them how they're doing, how's their day going. Like, start with some small talk, right? Warm them up, have a normal conversation. And then you can gradually kind of get into the purpose of why you're there and what you want to talk about. And the biggest thing to remember is that it's just a conversation. So don't act like it's an interrogation where you're like, I must ask them these 10 questions and like go on to the next one right away, right? And also be quiet. Don't talk too much. The worst thing is if you're interviewing someone and they're talking, you're like, oh yeah, I remember the time when I also did that, and like you want to tell them what you think, and you cut them off, and then they stop talking. So just let them talk mostly. Like don't talk too much. And also listen really carefully to what they're saying. So if their answer is really interesting, maybe the next question that you've prepared is like something totally different, but their answer, you're going to want to follow up on their answer, obviously, and go deeper into what they're saying if they've said something really interesting. So keep that in mind. Also, just be curious about them. So that's also a really important thing. You want to also be genuinely interested in what they're talking about. That will help them open up more. And then using your prepared questions only as a guide. So don't feel like you have to stick to them. oftentimes I'll prepare questions, do my research, prepare some questions, and then I won't even look at the questions when I'm doing the interview until like the very end, where I'm like, okay, let me just check and see if I've kind of covered all the topics I want to talk about. So it's more so a list of things you want to make sure you talk about, not necessarily specific questions. What else is down here? There's a note here about knowing when to ask an emotional question versus a factual one. So if their answer turns out to be like, oh, I decided to present at the UGC because like, or maybe they say like, oh, I was so nervous to present at UGC and I spent a month preparing and every day I did my presentation over and over again. Your next question shouldn't be like, oh, where did you practice your presentation? Like your next question should be like, oh, well, after a month, how did you feel then, right? So you want to ask more about the emotion instead of like something factual and boring. So just knowing how to steer that conversation is really important too. And related to being quiet is don't be afraid of silence sometimes. With a podcast, I suppose you may be worried like, oh, there's like going to be a silent pause, but you're going to be editing it, so it's fine. And most of the time people hate silence, so they will fill it with something. So if you just stop talking and let there be silence, they'll keep talking. And usually those are the moments where they elaborate more, they continue talking, they share something even better. So let them do that. And it's okay to ask them to elaborate or clarify. It's okay not to know things. You may feel like you need to, like, if you're interviewing Jeff Ward, you may feel like you need to know everything about him and his work to show that you've done your research. But it's okay to tell him, like, oh, can you tell me more about that? And, you know, I'm not really familiar with your work there. Let me, like, tell me about it. It's fine to do that. And for sure, take notes. So even though you're going to have the recording and you can go back and listen to it, you want to take notes during your interview so that you kind of have a good idea of what you think is the most important thing that they're saying throughout it. And then I always like to end with a really open question, like, is there anything else about presenting at UGC that you'd like to share? Maybe there's something you didn't ask them, so they didn't have a chance to tell you, but they really want to share with you. And often that question gets something really good out of someone. It also often gets them to like summarize everything they've just been telling you, because they go, no, but I just want to say like blah blah blah, and then they give you this really nice quote or sound bite in your case. So that question can be really good. Okay, so that's kind of during the interview. Any questions about that part? All sounds good? Sounds doable? After the interview, of course, you want to thank them. So that might be like a follow-up email, you know, the next day or something, just to thank them for their time. In that same email, you may have questions or things you want to clarify with them, and then you can do that. Review your notes and think about the most important thing that they've said, and for you guys, you'll be thinking about which audio clips do I want to include, which parts of the interview were actually really good, and you probably want to do that right after you finish talking to them so that it's fresh in your mind. So that also goes back to not having to rush off to do something else right away. Okay, good. So that's kind of the whole interview process. Now, what kind of questions should you be asking these people? So in general, with any type of interview, don't ask them something that you could have Googled about them. People don't like that. And also, it's just a waste of time, right? Because you don't have to ask them that. For the people that you're interviewing, I think they will be less kind of prickly. But for me, I've interviewed a lot of like artists and, you know, musicians or bands or whatever, and if you ask them an annoying question that they've heard before, they just kind of shut down and they're like, oh, this interview's stupid, why am I even bothering talking to you? So I don't think you guys have to worry about that too much with, fellow students and stuff, but yes.
And question, so it's answers that you can sort of Google. Is that something therefore that should be sort of in the introduction to the person in the podcast rather than something you would they would clarify through an interview question?
That's right, yeah, exactly. So that could be, the intro or the sort of narration part that so in a written form it would be like kind of the intro of your article, right? But yeah, same thing with a podcast.
Yeah.
And then, don't ask them yes or no questions, because that doesn't take the conversation anywhere. So there's an example here, instead of asking them, are you presenting at UGC this year? Ask them, what was it like to prepare for your presentation at UGC this year? So you want to ask them things that get them talking about how they feel or what they think. Maybe less problematic for you guys, but generally you don't want to ask leading questions. As a reporter, that's really important, but so instead of saying, you must be so excited to present at UGC this year, like don't assume that they're super excited. You can just ask them, how does it feel to be presenting at UGC this year? And then most of your questions should start with the words how, why, or what. Those are the kind of questions that will get you good, detailed, thoughtful answers. So things like, what made you decide to present at UGC this year? How has UGC helped you work towards your academic goals? Why do you think students choose to present at UGC? How do you feel about presenting? So those types of things, you get the idea. And then just try to ask them interesting questions. So try to ask questions that show that you've maybe done a bit of research about them or their topic, or and you have kind of interesting things to say. And like I was saying before, this is more of a problem for someone who gets interviewed a lot, like a celebrity or a musician. They don't want to hear the same questions. They're like, I don't have time for your interview. Okay, so now let's move on to you guys doing some exercises to practice this. So take a few minutes and research our keynote speaker, Jeff Ward, and pretend that you have an interview planned with him and come up with a list of questions or things you may want to talk about with him, and then we'll review those.
Is the full name Jeffrey Allen Ward?
Is it?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
So he's not an SFU person. I'll tell you a little more details about him so it's not so mysterious. He works. He has a company called Animiki, Animiki, I think, or maybe that's two I's.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. In this handout, there's a link to his website.
Okay.
Yes, that guy. Jeff.io.
Are they working on something?
They're researching.
I had a chat with Susan
Oh.
because she was like, "Can you come talk to me after?" I'm like, "Calm." Yeah. I'll update you on that after.
How much time do you need for?
Probably another 40 minutes. But we're also gonna, if we're gonna do mixed board, that might be a bit longer.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll be done pretty soon.
What happened to this dude?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
He just stepped out.
Okay. Probably
He's
gonna get a
still-
coffee.
Bathroom coffee.
Yeah. Yeah, the summary of that meeting was, just gonna, the meeting got pushed back by 7 days. Yeah. So, for now, we're going to generate a list of all the past students and, put together a canned email notifying them of where the site is now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
but
situation.
yeah, but she's going to put together, she has a few ideas and a few proposals for moving forward, and she's gonna bring the department and talk to them next week. Yeah,
Okay.
she says, you know, we can do within this week, we can send out the email just letting them know of the situation.
At least getting that notification is
Yeah.
important.
Action.
Yeah. And that has to happen regardless. So.
Yeah. The challenge is the Sarah Shamish classes, which I might not have the class list for. Yeah. So
I
I'll,
want someone to be able to provide that.
I talked to Faria, she might be able to. She's like, I can pull 96 students' emails manually with a mildly sad face, because it's quite a bit of work, right? But she can. But I'll also talk to Des and see if she has access. I mean, I would assume as the administrator, right? You have some sort of
Something
access.
like that,
Fall of 2016.
Okay, how's the research going?
Going.
It's going.
Long questions, but not too many of them.
Has anyone thought of anything they would want to ask Jeff if they were interviewing him?
Yeah, I thought of a few questions, but they aren't specific to the FCAT conference. I tried
Okay.
to sort of tie it to university education because he started his businesses at 17, and as
Mhm.
far as I could tell, he hasn't gone to university. So really asking him what he would have liked to know before he started
Mhm.
business and how he can see university education actually adding possibly to
Mhm.
success, and
Yeah.
that would be interesting.
That's a really great question, because it is interesting that he's the keynote speaker at a university conference, having never been to university. You know, what does he is he
Yeah.
pro university? What does he
Mhm.
think about it? Does he
Yeah.
think it's beneficial for people?
Because there are lots of ways to gain knowledge. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't go to high school or half of elementary school. I was homeschooled.
Right.
So I mean, definitely you can pick up these things, but
Yeah.
having somebody's perspective who is very successful
Mhm.
business-wise, who hasn't gone to university, would be
Yeah,
interesting.
that's a great question. Yeah, that would be an interesting conversation to have with him.
I don't know if you're supposed to see that, but there's this new interface. There's this interface that actually breaks down all this analytics.
Oh, interesting.
This is new.
Anybody else have other thoughts? Or what is kind of interesting about him that you've found out in your research that could lead to questions? You don't necessarily have to have a question yet.
Seems like he has 3 companies,
Yeah.
so I'd be interested to ask about why he has I don't like why he took that risk, or
Yeah.
maybe I don't know.
No, that's true. Yeah, why not focus on one? Or
Yeah.
Maybe each one has a very different purpose, and you know,
Probably, yeah.
he probably has logical reasons, but it would be interesting to hear why.
Yeah, and his TED talk was about like the reconciliation movement and why sharing like the voices of Indigenous people is important, which kind of ties into his site or business anonymity.
Yeah, that's right.
That's something. I don't know what question specifically, but somewhere on that thread.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, generally when you're researching, you start with like, oh, that's interesting. That's a topic I would want to talk to him about, and then you develop the questions. So it's all on the right track.
Sort of, I found some research that you speak sort of Indigenous ways of seeing and knowing, and sort of how that is integrated into his company. And I think that that's a really current question for university education. For example, in a class I have now, we're speaking of African epistemology and how a world can be perceived differently, how they can be not only the visible form but also invisible structures and in different layers of perception. And that would be really interesting because I feel that it is now perhaps based a lot in academics, but seeing that he has integrated into the big business sector is very relevant.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that's a big topic that you would, I think, definitely interviewing him, any interview you do with him, you'd want to touch on reconciliation and indigenization and all that stuff for sure. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts?
I'm just trying to connect to the internet.
Oh, okay.
It's not working.
Oh no.
I don't know why.
That's too
That's a
bad.
few
Well,
nights.
that looks different.
I don't know, it's like I did the
Look at all
recent
the
password
analytics you
thing,
can get.
and now I can't connect to
Oh.
the internet.
Oh.
There
And
was-
this- how long
I
after
read something
submission
about
it
how
was
to
late, it
fix
was
that
missing.
or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Let me
so
see.
I'm trying to
Email.
figure it out.
That's so cool.
I have not changed my password yet.
Same.
I'll do it.
Oh, you should do it.
I did it, and that's why I'm having troubles.
Oh, the faster you do it, the better, though, because whoever got that information might start trying to crack people's passwords.
And stuff.
Okay, so that's kind of the process, right? You Google them, read up on them, start thinking about what's interesting about this person, what do I want to talk to them about, what would be an interesting topic in an interview, and then you develop the questions from there. Okay, good. So let's move on to some practical application of actually interviewing someone. So if you can pair up into two pairs, I guess you two and you two or something, and you're going to practice interviewing each other. And so for this interview, you're not going to have any questions prepared. So you're going to practice interviewing someone in a natural way. It's just a conversation back and forth. So let's give that a try. So you'll need your voice recorders for this. There's two there.
It's one of these words, or you guys have
There's one there. There's one here. And then those two. And probably one group should go outside somewhere so that we're not competing with the noise.
Interesting.
So don't worry what these conversations are like. They're just more for practice, and then you'll have audio files to practice editing.
Say something interesting. Then we can add sound effects to them and it'll be fun. So apparently it seems like they lock you out after a certain period of time.
Oh.
Because I used to be able to message all the past classes, not anymore. So now I only see like PDP and the university draft stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember I used to be able to message like Sarah's class, my class, and then even Susan's class. I was able to look back 3 terms. Interesting.
You all remember how to set up your recorders?
Wrong thing. I'm gonna try something as well. Let's see if we can actually use this as a microphone.
Are we setting up the last two or just?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you record with the lav.
So this is low battery or is it on? Or is
That's
it
on. Oh, that's on.
Okay. And
Yeah.
low battery. That's
Low
just-
battery. I
Will it flash?
think it'll turn. I think red is low battery.
Oh.
Yeah, but then again, these batteries are really crap. Again, I highly recommend that you bring your own batteries.
Is the receiver always the one with the weird thing
Yeah.
on the back?
Yeah, the hot shoe mount. You know what? Red is probably
On.
on.
Okay.
No.
Those ones, I don't know. Is there another one?
No.
No.
Well, yeah, you can use this one, but you don't need to.
Okay, yeah.
Did it work?
Yeah, I'm just formatting the code.
Audio hardware. Input. No input. No links.
So in order to have it record the questions in here and here, it's gonna be one of the. It's possible to put it so that it records this as well as that.
Mm-hmm.
Simultaneously? No.
Oh.
No.
Okay, so it's just gonna.
When
be
you're on
that.
an external input, you can only record on the external input.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
The limitations of these devices. Okay. Yeah, okay, so you can only have one, I think. I don't think you can have multiple inputs.
Hmm.
Can I borrow one of your audio recorders, please?
Sure.
I'm still going. Card full. Oh no.
They have no audio.
Oh well, I got the camera going, so we should be fine.
That audio will be fine.
Is this ours?
As long as this continues to record, yes. If.
Mm-hmm. You guys can also go out there if you want.
Okay.
It might be
And
less weird, and then you won't be on camera during this.
I think this is how things go.
Do you want to put this recording for now?
Sure. So Tessa, you hucked the computer?
Hmm?
Did you bring the hard drives?
Wait, is this part?
Got it? Maybe.
So yeah. Okay.
Okay.
You stop?
You're gonna have to do that, I'm not sure.
Okay. Did you bring the hard drives?
I did.
Okay.
Those are also
Okay.
in the car.
Yeah.
Okay.
Weird.
So there's gonna be a trip to the car at some point today.
Yes.
2007.
Whoa.
Oh no. What?
We're good.
Did you just see that?
What happened?
So I didn't even type in my password yet, but when I plugged this in, it logged in and then logged me back out.
Just double checking.
Yeah.
That seems like a security
What is
flaw.
the mistake one?
Just a bit.
Sure.
Say 2007.
No. I saw last one, yeah.
Oh, do you have a card?
True. Now we are recording. Oh no, I hate my voice.
Don't worry.
Everybody hates their own voice.
Yeah.
We all do. Okay, so go ahead and get Audition open. Go away. Why did I try to open After Effects? Do you know how to use it? I have no idea.
I can try. I used other antivirus.
Go away. There we go. So, you should have some visual at some point, I hope. GA. Top display, left display, right display.
The staff of the Surrey campus.
So many of them.
Not part of the presentation.
Let's get our displays mirrored. Beautiful. Okay. So once you have Audition open, you should be on this screen right here. Oh my god. Okay. You can go ahead and import your file by using the shortcut key Command-I or Control-I if you're on Windows. and navigate to your audio file. Now, what I would recommend is that you download that audio file off of the SD card and onto your computer, because if you return the SD card without pulling the files off, then the library will format the SD card and you'll lose the file. So definitely first step, always download the SD card to your computer. What I would suggest is you set up a file structure that makes sense. So for example, for today, we're going to do podcast workshop. Inside the podcast workshop folder, I would create 3 different folders. One being the assets folder, one being the source folder, and the other being the project folder. People Intuit 2, this should be somewhat familiar to you. These folders will help you keep organized as you move between different people, between different software. And you'll want to bring your audio into the source folder. So what are these 3 different folders? The source folder is for your audio source, that is the raw footage that you record. The project folder is where you save your project. The asset folder is any assets that you use, be it special effects or title cards or sound clips that you got off the internet. Anything that you didn't create, you put it into the assets folder. So asset, project, and source. So now that I know that my audio is in my podcast folder in the source, I can open that and you should see that I am importing it. Oh, it's still copying. Well, never mind. That's going to take a while because I'm going to do it right off this is bad practice. Do as I say, not as I do, but I'm going to pull it off of, edit right off of here. If that even works. Will you let me? Please let me.
How long is it going to take to copy? Oh, there.
It takes a hot minute. Let's see. How long is that going to take? 20 minutes. Yeah. Okay.
Right,
We're
yeah.
not doing that.
You're like, thanks for coming, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for. Okay. In this case, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to escape out of it. Cancel. It's not letting me cancel either. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to record something. So. There we go. Good. Now we have something there to look at. So for you guys, you should, once you import it, you should see it appear in the top left-hand file manager. If you double-click on it, that will get you into the editing mode. The first step of editing a podcast is very similar to that of editing a film, is culling your content. Going through and removing things that you do not want, you do not desire. So listening back into the track, and it could be as simple as removing the ums and ahs, or removing just blank space, just to create a nice, solid track that you can do the rest of your podcast with. So for example, I can play back my file. I say that, but I don't have my audio hardware. Make sure I'm actually exporting it coming out of the external speakers. That is okay, and now you should hear me over there. Am I plugged in? Yeah, I'm plugged in. Okay, you should hear me go bala 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 bala. Okay, so say I do not want one of those balas. I'm gonna go and highlight the bala and go here, and you can actually delete that bala. And you can see I have removed that bala from the audio track. So for you guys, it might be an it might be an it might be a like. So for example, I did an interview with a indigenous artist. That guy has great storytelling, but he loves saying and like. Every sentence was emphasized with an and like. So basically what we had to do was we had to go through and cut out the and likes. Otherwise, it gets really distracting. Mm-hmm. So once you have a master track, so say there is noise, there's kids screaming in the background, you can just remove it from here. If your audio has too much noise, so for example, there's that ventilation grate over there that is generating a lot of hum, and you want to remove that, what you can do, and what I highly recommend you do, is always record a little bit of extra silence from inside that room. So for example, you see here there is a few moments of silence in my audio recording. You can actually use this silence to record that hum and remove it from the rest of your track. So what you do is you select that moment of silence, you right click, and you hit capture noise print. Capture noise print. Once you capture the noise print, it'll say you're capturing, and you're like, okay, I know. You go into effects. You go into noise reduction, and you can hit the noise reduction process. And on this panel, you can manage how much of the noise you want to reduce and how much you're reducing it by. Now, if I just unplug you, will you play out of the computer speakers? Okay, open the audio panel. Oh no.
Are you right clicking on the thing after you select it?
Yes. So let's see if we can play it. Oh wow.
Well, we're just looking at it, so it's gonna get distracted
Lovely,
if
Jay.
we make it loud. So normally what you want, you actually want to zoom into it.
That could be your
We're just-
podcast intro.
Yes, bada 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 bada. Welcome to the Para podcast.
What you really
But like,
So yeah, normally a software tutorial would be like an hour or two.
because you did that to here. But like,
Is
what
there
do you-
anything online that you can recommend, like a
You want to
tutorial?
show it, yes.
Yes.
Noise reduction, is it noise reduction process?
Yes.
Roughly here should be.
And then basically what you can do is you can listen, you know, if you have headphones in, you can actually hear the difference between the noise reduction, how much you're reducing the noise, as well as how much you're reducing it by. Please note, if you're cleaning it up too much, your voice is going to start sounding very digital. So for example, I'm going to do 100% noise reduction at let's do that, 100%, 100 decibels? Let's try that. Oh man, listen to this fall apart. Oh, you can't actually hear the difference on here. So normally if you're listening to voice using headphones, you will be able to hear that the noise is starting to sound very digital, artificial. That is because you pushed the noise too far. So once you've cleaned up your audio track, you're going to go and into File, New, Multi-Track Session. The shortcut command is Command N or Control N on a PC. It's funny, there's like a divide in the room. Mac users, PC users. In the multi-track section, actually, every time you create a new file, please give it a meaningful name. If you don't give it a meaningful name, Untitled 1 is not a meaningful name. If I asked you what is inside Untitled 1, would you be able to tell me, yes or no? No, you wouldn't. So always give your files a meaningful name. In this case, we're going to call it the podcast mixdown. So here, you can also select templates. Podcast is the template. Guess what it's for? Podcast. Right. So let's click that, and we can use that as our, and you will see now multiple different tracks, your host, your interview, your sound effects, your music bed, and your master. So the ones that you can manipulate are host, interview, sound effects, and music bed. If you have more than one interviewee, you can add more tracks so you can have multiple interviews. So what now you're going to do is you can take your different files and you can put it down onto, drag it in. Wait, I'm dragging the wrong one. Drag in the audio file and you can put it onto the track. Sometimes you will see sample rate disparities. Yeah, we'll just conform it, that's fine. So now you can see, I can zoom in. There's a zoom command somewhere.
But do we have to separate the host and the interview?
Sorry?
Do we have to separate the host and the interview?
Not necessarily, it depends on how you recorded it. So for example, with the mixer, you would be able to record two separate different tracks. With your audio recorder, not necessarily.
Got it.
And for the purposes of the interview, what you guys might be doing is you might be going and interviewing people and then recording your host in post.
Yeah, that's right. The
Yeah.
interview may be just the person that you talk to. Maybe you don't want to include your voice in your questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you are telling the story as the host, and that's your own track that you're recording way after the interview. That's when you come and put the narrative together. So in this case, I have Bala Bala as my interviewee. Let's see if I can record just another clip. And I would like to introduce Mr. Bala Bala. Let's see if that would actually record it. It did, and I can drag it in, and we can play it back. Okay, that is not, that's different. Did it just create a second audio file? No way. It did. Interesting.
Yeah, they're the same
It
thing.
is the same thing, yeah. I'm just trying to be very mindful of the time right now, so I'm rushing. Imagine there was an actual proper audio clip there. And you're like, wow, this is so awesome. I want to emphasize it with sound. So if you go onto the desktop of the library computers or any of the computers at Surrey campus, you should be able to see on the desktop, on the right-hand side of the desktop, there should be a thing called Sound Files. It's a server with audio. No, I can pull it up on here. Go connect a server, and it's called the Sound Files, the CAT Sound Library. Once we hit connect, I will log into that.
Sorry, how'd you get there?
So for you guys, it's on the desktop. For you, on that computer, it's on the desktop, top right-hand
Oh, okay,
corner.
okay.
There's a problem connecting to the server. Okay. I guess I can't connect to it. Oh.
Can we access it from our own computer?
No. So the tip there is to copy the file out.
Hmm.
That is so weird. This link used to work. Can I access it here?
It's working.
And it's going to tell me it's the wrong password because I changed my password. There it is. Soundfiles.command. Please work. See, it works here.
It only works on the Sure.
Oh no, it stopped working. Okay, so it's not working right now. So normally it is a library that's about 800 gigabytes in size of different sounds. There are gunshot sounds, there are wee woo sounds, there are bala bala sounds, there are whatever sounds you want. You know, chairs creaking. You know, you can basically create an entire immersive audio environment using the sounds from there. It has some music. Music is the one that's going to be a challenge. It doesn't have a lot of music. So you can basically go in and add that, pull those files. When you pull them, where do you put it in your folder structure?
Assets.
In your assets. Bring it into your assets. Don't rely on the fact that it's still on the server, because sometimes, like in our case, it's not. Can't access the server. GG, right? So, and you bring that in and you put it on either your sound effects or your music bed. Once you're done, you can go to File, Export, and I believe it's called Multi-Track Mixdown, and you can mix down the entire session. Here you can decide on what format. I would suggest a WAV file as your final output, and basically give it a name. Make sure you know where you're putting it, its location, and you hit OK, and that is your mixdown. That's basically it. It's really quite simple. Like, this piece of software can give you so much more, but there is really not much time to talk about that. It's like Premiere. Getting started is fast. Question?
Yeah, so when we download the Audition onto our laptop, which
Yes.
version?
Here's the thing. All of the SFU computers, the borrowable computers, are 2008. Like Premiere, like basically any Adobe software, you can move it forward, but it's very hard to bring it backwards. So if you want to use the school computers to work with, I would suggest 2008. And I believe the version here is, let it log on. Oh wow, this moves fast. At least that part goes fast. It's build 11.1.0. If that. 0.184, because I see you moving it down. But yeah, make sure you're either newer than that or the same as that. If you're using an older version, you basically, can you bring a Audition file backwards? I don't know, I've never tried. I don't work with Audition a lot. Premiere, you have to export it as Final Cut,
Yeah.
and then re-import it, and you lose things and it's agitating.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is essentially it. Any questions about, other questions about this? All right, in the next 5 minutes, we're going to talk about using the Mixboard.
Yay.
I just want to add one point about editing your interviews. Don't be afraid to edit what people have said in your interviews. Don't be afraid to cut parts out. Don't be afraid to move things around. Like, don't be afraid to make them sound better by removing the ums and ahs and
Yeah.
stuff. they'll thank you for it.
And you can manipulate the narrative a little bit, not like
Yeah.
fake news levels of
Yeah.
manipulation.
Don't take what they said out of context
Yeah.
completely, but you can like change the order, right? It doesn't have to be like, oh, but they didn't say that right after I said that. Like, so you can use your judgment a bit.
Yeah. And the emphasis there being, like Biden was taken out of context
That's
yesterday.
right.
Like, what is this?
Yeah.
You must
We can only elect Donald Trump. Don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. So this is a mix board. You can have a bunch of different inputs. Here you can see there's 4 different microphone XLR inputs. The beauty of this mix board and why you use it is so you can actually do a lot of your mixing here. But you can also plug the USB in here onto a computer and basically record as many different tracks as there are inputs. So you can actually record 8 different channels. If you had 8 different people with 8 different microphones, you can actually record 8 different lines right onto the audio recorder. I'm not going to talk a lot about how to actually set it up because there ain't no time. Power is right here. There are mics there are 2 mics in the mic bag. Plug them in here. Google this model number, read the manual. That's my big tip right now. There's a USB cable and you can plug it in. So that's eventually it. I know it's not what you wanted, but as far as we can
It
get.
works.
Yeah. If you do not want to sit there listening through, did you talk about Otter?
Yes.
Okay, Otter, use it. If you don't want to sit there listening to it, take your cleaned up audio, pump it through Otter, and it'll give you a nice transcript to work with. If you upload just your raw audio, that it's as nice as it is, it might not clean it up as well. And you'll get a lot of like, ahs, and sometimes they'll mix the words in the ums and ahs. Yeah. Okay, we have to pack up.
Should we talk about how we're gonna communicate that's not through email right now, or is that gonna be over email?
Yeah, we should. So, so Kim sent out that email about signing up for groups. So basically, we're gonna have 3 groups of 4 students, and then within those groups, you'll decide. On the sheet Kim sent, there's different roles like host, writer, editor, whatever. So you guys can decide what you're more interested in doing, and then within your group of 4, figure out kind of more specifically who's doing what, and it can be collaborative and you can help each other. So do that for sure, sign up for that. And then what communication channel are you all most interested in using to stay in touch with each other? Does a Facebook group work, or is it?
I have WhatsApp and Facebook, so
Yeah.
or iMessage.
Yeah, I'm
Whatever.
used to Facebook for like academic stuff.
You don't have Facebook. Okay. So maybe a WhatsApp group is better. Does everyone have
WhatsApp?
WhatsApp?
Yeah.
I don't, but I can set it up.
Okay. Okay, so maybe we'll do that. Yeah, so maybe we'll get that set up within the next day or so.
Do we need everyone's phone numbers to do WhatsApp?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I the only one imagining that might be a problem?
That might be. If everyone could give us their phone number, that would be good. But I don't know. I know that, yeah, Kim has run into some non-responsive challenges with asking for emails and things like that. So I don't know how quickly we'd be able to get something set up with everyone's phone number. But we'll do our
There's
best.
always like Slack, but I don't know if people check it.
Slack is possibly even worse because you're getting someone to sign up for a news. How many of you have Facebook?
You can just sign up for Messenger. You don't actually.
I
Yeah.
tried
Yeah.
that, but it wouldn't allow me. That's the thing. Like I've tried.
I think it makes
Getting
you do
it.
both. Like basically, you have to do both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the new one doesn't allow you to do just one.
Yeah, and then I tried doing a Facebook account, and it was like, no, you can't because you have no background. And I was like, okay, well, thank you. We can figure it out. I don't know.
I wonder if you could create like a dummy account.
That's what I'm
like
trying
a
to
fake
do.
like.
Because no, they have the real name shit now.
Yeah, and you
It's
need to
so
have
agitating.
a real name, and you need to have a real image and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
I was like, I don't want to put my information here. So
Oh,
I can
okay,
try out,
okay.
yeah. But
Well, I don't want to force you to use Facebook.
Isn't WhatsApp also owned by Facebook?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
So it's all the
Real.
same.
It's agitating. Okay, help me unpack by disassembling all the kits and making sure that everything that is belong inside the kit is in the kit.
Is it logged off?
basically help me save my wallet because these.
Yeah, can you just shut it down, please?
If you don't return something, my wallet is gonna hurt.
Go in here.
Yes.
That's that one, I
Yes, I will
assume.
take this one.